Karen tells teen in Hijab to take that off or leave, didn't know her dad owns the cafe. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today, and if you like this story, don't forget to subscribe. The little cafe sat on the corner of a quiet street, nestled between a colorful bookstore and a florist whose window display changed with the seasons. Its worn wooden sign creaked gently in the breeze, the faded letters reading Amina's Café, a small, family-run place that had become a beloved fixture in the neighborhood over the years. The scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint aroma of cardamom and cinnamon, drawing in a steady flow of customers from all walks of life. The cafe had a charm that felt both warm and familiar, with mismatched chairs, hand-painted murals on the walls, and shelves stocked with homemade pastries. It was a place where people came not just to drink coffee but to connect, to slow down, and to feel part of a community that celebrated its diversity. That afternoon, the cafe buzzed with the usual hum of chatter, clinking cups, and the occasional burst of laughter. Amina's husband was behind the counter, expertly frothing milk for cappuccinos while their teenage son busied himself refilling the sugar jars and wiping down tables. The staff moved with practiced ease, greeting regulars by name and remembering their favorite orders. It was the kind of place where the baristas knew your drink before you even reached the counter, and strangers could become friends over a shared table. On this particular day, the sun filtered softly through the large windows, casting a golden glow over the customers seated inside. People from every background mingled effortlessly, students with backpacks, elderly couples sharing quiet conversations, and office workers sneaking in a quick break from their busy schedules. Among the patrons was a teenage girl with expressive eyes framed by a hijab that covered her hair and neck in a soft, patterned fabric of deep blues and greens. She sat near the window, her gaze occasionally lifting from the book she was reading to watch the world outside. Her name was Layla, and she had recently moved to the neighborhood with her family. This was her first time visiting the cafe, encouraged by a friend who had described it as a safe and welcoming spot. Layla had felt immediately at ease in the vibrant neighborhood, where she noticed people dressed in a variety of styles and traditions, all blending into the lively tapestry of city life. The cafe's gentle ambience matched the feeling she wanted to hold on to, a place where she could be herself without worry or judgment. As Layla quietly sipped her chai latte, taking small notes in the margins of her book, a sudden shift rippled through the room. The door swung open with a force that startled some of the customers, and in strode a woman whose presence seemed to demand attention. She was tall, with sharp features and an expression that held a mix of annoyance and superiority. Her name was Karen, a regular at the cafe who was known for her loud voice and unfiltered opinions. Karen often acted as though the cafe belonged to her, even though she was just another customer. On this day, however, something about Layla's appearance seemed to catch her off guard, or perhaps it was an irritation that refused to be quieted. Karen's eyes locked onto the hijab, and her lips curled into a disapproving sneer. Without hesitation, Karen raised her voice just enough to carry over the soft music playing in the background, her words sharp and unwelcome. "Hey, you. Yeah, you. That thing on your head, take it off or leave. Head coverings aren't appropriate indoors." Her tone was not just firm but aggressively judgmental, as if she had the authority to dictate what was acceptable in a public space. The cafe fell into an uncomfortable silence. Customers exchanged glances, some startled, others quietly fuming. The barista paused mid-pour, and even the elderly couple at the corner table looked over with concern. Layla's heart pounded, but she remained calm, her voice steady as she responded, "This is my hijab. It's part of my faith and who I am." She hoped that was enough to end the confrontation, but Karen seemed undeterred. Karen's face flushed with indignation, her eyes narrowing. "I don't care what it is. This is a public place. You shouldn't wear things like that here. It makes people uncomfortable." Her voice rose slightly, drawing more attention from the room. Some customers shifted in their seats, unsure whether to intervene or stay silent. Layla felt a knot tightening in her stomach, but she refused to be intimidated. She tried again, softer this time, "I have every right to be here, just like everyone else." Karen scoffed loudly, turning her gaze toward the baristas who were now watching nervously from behind the counter. The tension was palpable, thickening the air like a sudden storm. One of the younger staff members, trying to defuse the situation, stepped forward and said quietly, "Ma'am, please, let's keep it respectful. Everyone's welcome here." Karen, however, wasn't finished. She waved dismissively at the staff member, then fixed her gaze back on Layla. "Look, I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. No one wants to see that here. It's distracting, and frankly, it's disrespectful." The word stung like a slap. Customers began murmuring amongst themselves, some nodding sympathetically toward Layla, others glancing uneasily at Karen. The atmosphere that had been so warm and inviting moments before now felt cold and fractured. It was as if Karen's words had thrown a shadow across the whole room. Layla took a deep breath, willing herself not to break. She looked around, seeing the mixed reactions from the people who had been sharing the space with her, and felt a sudden surge of resolve. "I'm not going anywhere," she said firmly, her voice clear enough for everyone to hear. "I'm here to enjoy this cafe just like anyone else. And I won't take off my hijab because someone else is uncomfortable with it." A few customers gave her encouraging smiles, but Karen only seemed more incensed by the pushback. She opened her mouth to argue further when the cafe's front door opened again. This time, it wasn't just a customer or staff, it was a man who walked out from the kitchen, calm and composed, but with an unmistakable air of authority. Karen's expression instantly changed from confrontation to shock as her eyes widened in disbelief. The man was her father, the owner of the cafe. The man who had silently observed this entire scene from behind the scenes, now stepping forward into the light, ready to set things right. The cafe seemed to hold its breath as the man stepped fully into view, his presence immediately shifting the mood from tense and uncomfortable to something charged with quiet authority. His eyes swept over the room, landing finally on his daughter, Karen, who was still standing defiantly near the counter, her mouth slightly open as if searching for words that now seemed to desert her. The owner of Amina's cafe was a tall man with a calm, steady demeanor, his dark hair peppered with strands of silver and a warm, kind smile that belied the firmness in his gaze. He was known to the regulars not just as the man who owned the place, but as someone who had built the cafe from scratch alongside his wife, pouring love and respect into every corner of the space. The fact that he had remained out of the fray until now made it clear to everyone that the moment had crossed the line. Karen's father's voice was low but unmistakably clear as he addressed the room and, more pointedly, his daughter. "Karen, what is going on here?" The question was simple, but it carried a weight of expectation. Karen, still flushed from her confrontation and clearly caught off guard, tried to respond, stumbling over her words. "Dad, she was wearing that thing, that head covering, and I told her it's not appropriate indoors. It's disrespectful." There was a mixture of indignation and desperation in her tone, as though she expected her father to agree with her indignation. But instead, he shook his head gently, his eyes fixed on her with a mixture of disappointment and resolve. "This is my cafe," he said, his voice growing steadier, "and in this cafe, everyone is welcome, no exceptions. That includes Layla here, and anyone else who chooses to come through these doors. We don't tolerate discrimination, and we certainly don't tolerate anyone making others feel unwelcome because of their faith, their clothing, or who they are." The calm firmness of his words filled the room, silencing any murmurs and drawing the attention of every person present. Karen's face betrayed her surprise, the harsh certainty she had carried just moments ago now flickering with confusion and embarrassment. Layla, who had been watching the exchange with a mixture of anxiety and hope, felt a rush of relief wash over her. The owner's words were a protective shield, a public declaration that this was a space where she and others like her could feel safe and respected. She met the man's gaze with a shy, grateful smile, thankful that someone with real authority had stepped in to stop the harassment. The other customers, many of whom had been silent or uncertain during Karen's outburst, began to show their support too. A few nodded in approval, and some whispered words of encouragement to Layla. The atmosphere in the cafe started to lighten, the tension easing as the owner took control of the situation. Karen, however, was not ready to accept this rebuke quietly. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, it seemed she might argue further, but the firmness in her father's eyes made her hesitate. The man took a slow breath and continued, "Karen, I have to ask you to leave. Your behavior today has not only been disrespectful to Layla but also to everyone who comes here looking for a safe and welcoming space. We will not tolerate this kind of intolerance in my cafe. You are banned from this establishment effective immediately." The finality in his voice was unmistakable, and the room collectively held its breath as Karen processed the weight of the words. Her face reddened further, and she opened her mouth, perhaps to protest or to plead, but her father held up a hand, signaling that the conversation was over. Without another word, Karen turned on her heel and stormed toward the door, the bell above it ringing sharply as she exited. The cafe seemed to exhale, the sudden calm after the storm settling over the customers and staff alike. The owner turned back toward Layla and the others, a warm, reassuring smile replacing the stern expression from moments before. "I'm sorry you had to deal with that," he said gently, "but I'm glad you stood your ground." Layla nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and gratitude, her heart still pounding but steadier now that the ordeal was over. The baristas and staff quickly resumed their duties, but there was a new energy in the air, a sense of solidarity and respect that felt stronger than before. Customers returned to their conversations, and the gentle hum of the cafe's normal rhythm resumed, but the moment left an indelible mark on everyone present. The owner took a moment to speak quietly with Layla, offering her a complimentary drink and assuring her that she was always welcome there. The sincerity in his voice, combined with the warmth in the eyes of the staff and customers around her, created a sense of belonging that Layla hadn't quite expected when she first walked in. As the afternoon sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the wooden floor, the owner moved behind the counter, signaling for his family and staff to carry on. Karen's ban had become more than just a disciplinary action. It was a statement, a reminder that this cafe stood for more than just coffee and pastries. It was a sanctuary where respect, kindness, and acceptance were non-negotiable. The man's intervention had transformed a moment of potential division into one of unity, showing the true heart of Amina's cafe and the values it was built upon. Layla stayed a little longer, savoring the quiet peace that had returned. She watched as families came in, some with children, others with elderly relatives, all sharing stories and laughter in a space that felt inclusive and warm. The incident with Karen lingered in her mind, not as a source of fear, but as a reminder that standing up for oneself and others was important, and that there were people who would stand alongside her. It was clear that this cafe was more than a business, it was a community, woven together by the respect and courage of those who cared enough to protect it. The owner's quiet strength had not only defended a customer but had also reinforced a powerful message that would resonate far beyond the walls of the little cafe on the corner. The moment Karen's father had spoken, the entire dynamic of the cafe shifted, and the lingering tension that had hung thick in the air gradually began to dissolve into a sense of relief and quiet empowerment. Yet beneath the surface, the currents of what had just transpired stirred something deeper in the room, a profound recognition that this small corner of the world, so often overlooked, had become a battleground for dignity, respect, and belonging. For Layla, the sense of being seen and protected by the man who owned the cafe was both comforting and transformative. It was the kind of affirmation she hadn't anticipated when she first hesitated at the door. She looked around at the faces of the other customers, many of whom now wore expressions of quiet solidarity, some offering nods and smiles of encouragement as if to say, "You're not alone here." The cafe, with its mismatched tables and soft light, had momentarily become a symbol of resistance against prejudice and a beacon of acceptance. Karen, having stormed out just moments before, was undoubtedly reeling from the unexpected rebuke. Her pride wounded, her assumptions about entitlement shattered by her own father's firm stance, she retreated into the cool air outside. The neighborhood, so familiar to her, now felt foreign and isolating. The walk back to her car was heavy with embarrassment and anger, emotions that churned without clear direction. She felt betrayed by the very person she had expected to back her up, her father, the man whose business she had long taken for granted as a platform for her own opinions and judgments. In her mind, she tried to justify her behavior, convincing herself that she was only speaking her truth, that her discomfort was somehow valid and that Layla's presence challenged the norms she had been raised to believe in. But beneath it all was the sting of being publicly called out and denied the privilege she thought she had earned. Inside the cafe, the atmosphere began to return to its usual rhythm, but the undercurrent of what had occurred lingered in conversations whispered among customers and exchanged glances. The staff quietly exchanged relieved smiles, their respect for their employer deepened by the way he had handled the situation, not with anger or confrontation, but with calm authority and unwavering principles. Amina, the owner's wife, re-entered the dining area carrying a tray of freshly baked pastries, her eyes catching Layla's. She offered a warm smile, a silent message of welcome and support. Layla felt her heart swell with gratitude, the sense of being embraced by this family-run business providing a balm against the hurt inflicted moments earlier by Karen's harsh words. The owner returned to his station behind the counter, where he began to prepare drinks with the same careful attention as before, but now with a subtle glow of pride. Customers continued to trickle in and out, their conversations weaving a tapestry of stories, backgrounds, and cultures that reflected the neighborhood's diversity. The owner took a moment to glance toward Layla again, offering a reassuring nod that conveyed both respect and an unspoken invitation to come back anytime she wished. That gesture, small as it was, resonated deeply with Layla, reinforcing the sense that she was part of something larger than herself, a community that stood firmly against intolerance. Despite the calm restoration of order inside the cafe, the ripple effects of the confrontation extended beyond those walls. Word spread quickly throughout the neighborhood, as often happens in close-knit communities where news travels on the wind and through whispered conversations. Some expressed outrage at Karen's behavior, condemning her for the insensitivity and ignorance she had displayed. Others expressed admiration for the owner's decision to stand firmly in defense of inclusivity and respect. Local social media pages buzzed with discussions, many praising the cafe as a safe haven and highlighting the importance of standing up against discrimination. The story became a subtle but powerful reminder that everyday spaces could become sites of either exclusion or welcome, depending on the values upheld by those who ran them. As the day wore on and the sun began its slow descent, casting warm hues across the wooden floors and painted walls, Layla lingered for a while longer. She found comfort in the familiarity growing between her and the cafe staff, and in the gentle hum of conversations that celebrated shared humanity rather than division. She realized that while the incident with Karen had been painful and jarring, it had also been a catalyst, one that crystallized the importance of courage and kindness in the face of ignorance. She resolved silently to return, to be part of this community that valued respect and diversity, and to live her truth openly and without fear. Meanwhile, Karen's relationship with her father had undeniably shifted. Their dynamic, once marked by unspoken expectations and silent assumptions, now carried a new tension born of that public confrontation. At home, the conversation that followed was charged but honest. The father expressed his disappointment not just in Karen's behavior toward Layla but in the attitudes she had embraced, attitudes that clashed with the values he had tried to instill through the cafe and in their family life. Karen, defensive at first, was forced to reckon with the reality that her father's principles would not be compromised for her comfort or convenience. The experience planted a seed of reflection, however grudgingly, challenging her to reconsider what it meant to truly respect others, especially those whose lives and beliefs differed from her own. Back in the cafe, the owner's decision to ban Karen was more than a disciplinary measure. It was a clear message to the community and to his family that bigotry had no place in his establishment. It affirmed the ethos that had guided the business from its inception, a commitment to fostering a space where everyone could come as they were, without fear of judgment or exclusion. The cafe had always been more than just a place to grab coffee. It was a living testament to the values of acceptance and kindness, embodied in every smile, every cup poured, and every conversation shared. Layla's presence in the cafe now felt less like a quiet visit and more like a statement of resilience. Each time she returned, greeted warmly by the owner and staff, she felt the invisible threads of community strengthening around her. The incident with Karen became a story told in hushed tones and shared glances, a reminder that standing up for what is right can change hearts and minds and transform even the smallest places into beacons of hope. The cafe continued to bustle with life, a microcosm of a world that, despite its challenges, could be kinder and more accepting when people chose courage over fear and empathy over prejudice. In that small, sunlit corner of the neighborhood, amid the clatter of cups and the rich aroma of coffee, a quiet revolution had taken place, not with shouts or protests, but with the simple, steadfast act of welcoming everyone to the table. The days that followed the confrontation at the cafe unfolded with a gentle but unmistakable shift, as if the very air around Amina's cafe had been infused with a renewed sense of purpose and solidarity. The incident with Karen became something of an unspoken legend among the regulars, a story retold with a mixture of disbelief and quiet pride. For many, it was a powerful reminder that standing up against intolerance was not just an abstract ideal but a tangible, necessary act that could ripple outward and transform lives. Layla, now a familiar face at the cafe, found herself welcomed not just as a customer but as part of a family that had taken her side and shown her the strength of community. Every morning when she stepped through the door, the warmth from the staff and the owner greeted her like a comforting embrace, making the cafe feel more like home with each visit. The owner, whose decisive intervention had stopped Karen in her tracks, continued to quietly nurture the values that had made the cafe a haven in the neighborhood. His dedication was evident in every thoughtful gesture, from personally greeting newcomers to ensuring that the staff understood the importance of respect and kindness. He had seen firsthand how quickly prejudice could poison a space, but he also saw the extraordinary power of compassion and courage to heal and protect. In the weeks following the ban, he made subtle changes that reflected the cafe's commitment to inclusivity, signage welcoming people of all backgrounds, staff trainings emphasizing cultural sensitivity, and occasional community events celebrating the rich diversity of the neighborhood. These efforts, though small, sent a clear message that this cafe was a place where everyone's story mattered. For Layla, the experience became a turning point in her young life. It was one thing to believe in acceptance and respect in theory, but quite another to witness it in action so vividly. The support she received gave her the confidence to embrace her identity openly, no longer shrinking away from the hijab she wore as a symbol of faith and pride. She began to engage more deeply with the cafe community, striking up conversations with other patrons and even volunteering to help with small events. Her presence helped bridge gaps between different groups in the neighborhood, inspiring others to consider what it meant to truly welcome and listen. The cafe, once simply a place to enjoy a good cup of tea or coffee, had become a classroom of empathy and understanding, a microcosm where the ideals of respect and kindness were practiced daily. Karen, meanwhile, remained absent from the cafe, her ban a constant reminder of the boundaries that intolerance could not cross. The distance forced her to confront not just her father's disappointment but the broader consequences of her actions. Conversations at home were tense, fraught with a mixture of frustration and reluctant reflection. Her father, who had always believed in leading by example rather than by force, hoped that time would allow her to reconsider her views. Though she had initially rejected the idea of change, the isolation and the visible shift in her family's values chipped away at her certainty. The community's reaction, the quiet but firm refusal to accept her behavior, served as an indirect lesson in accountability. Whether Karen would ultimately grow from the experience remained uncertain, but the seeds of awareness had been planted in a way that couldn't be ignored. The cafe itself continued to thrive, not only as a business but as a symbol of what could be achieved when people chose respect over fear, inclusion over exclusion. The owner's steadfast leadership and the community's embrace of diversity created an atmosphere where differences were celebrated rather than feared. New faces appeared regularly, some curious about the story they had heard, others seeking a space that felt safe and welcoming. The ripple effect extended beyond the walls of Amina's cafe, influencing neighboring businesses and inspiring conversations about the importance of creating inclusive environments everywhere, from schools to workplaces to public spaces. The small cafe on the corner had become, in a quiet but powerful way, a beacon of hope and progress. One afternoon, as the golden light filtered through the windows and bathed the cafe in a warm glow, Layla found herself seated at her favorite table near the window, a fresh cup of tea steaming gently before her. The familiar sounds of chatter and laughter surrounded her, mingling with the comforting scent of baked goods and coffee. She felt a profound sense of belonging, a feeling that had taken root through the kindness and courage of others. The owner approached, carrying a small plate with a piece of baklava, which he placed beside her with a smile. "For you," he said simply, "for being part of our family." The gesture touched her deeply, a quiet acknowledgement of her strength and the journey they had all taken together. As the day wore on, the cafe filled with its usual mix of customers, each adding their own stories and voices to the tapestry of the place. The legacy of the confrontation with Karen lived on not as a source of bitterness or division, but as a reminder of the values that held the community together. Respect, kindness, and the courage to stand up for what is right were now woven into the very fabric of Amina's cafe. And as Layla looked around at the smiling faces, the shared moments, and the vibrant spirit of the neighborhood, she knew that this was more than just a place to drink coffee. It was a home, a safe harbor where everyone could be themselves and where intolerance had no place. In that moment, surrounded by warmth and acceptance, Layla felt a deep and lasting hope for the future. The story of that day, of standing firm against injustice and being embraced by a community that valued her for who she was, would stay with her always. It was a testament to the power of courage and compassion, and a reminder that even in the smallest of places, change was possible. The cafe, with its faded sign and welcoming doors, stood as a quiet promise that love and respect could overcome fear and ignorance, one cup at a time. Years after that unforgettable day at Amina's cafe, the story of Karen's outburst and the owner's firm response had taken on a life of its own within the neighborhood. It was no longer just a tale about a confrontation over a hijab or a head covering. It had grown into a narrative about courage, dignity, and the profound impact that standing up against intolerance can have on a community. Layla, who had once hesitated to enter the cafe, had blossomed into a confident and engaged young woman whose identity was no longer a source of vulnerability but a wellspring of pride. Her experiences in the cafe, being embraced by its staff and customers alike, had inspired her to become an advocate for inclusion, organizing cultural events, workshops, and conversations designed to bridge gaps and foster empathy across differences. The cafe had become more than a place to enjoy a warm drink. It was now a vibrant hub of learning, connection, and solidarity. The owner of the cafe, whose quiet strength and unwavering commitment to kindness had changed the course of that day, continued to nurture the community he helped build with passion and care. His leadership became a model for others in the neighborhood, inspiring nearby businesses to adopt similar principles of respect and inclusivity. Over time, Amina's cafe developed a reputation far beyond its cozy walls, known as a sanctuary where everyone could be welcomed without fear or judgment. The cafe hosted open mic nights, cultural celebrations, and charity fundraisers that brought people together, celebrating the neighborhood's rich mosaic of backgrounds and traditions. Every cup poured and every conversation shared within those walls echoed the values that had been fiercely protected when Karen was banned: respect, acceptance, and the courage to stand firm in what is right. Karen's story remained a quieter thread in the neighborhood's fabric. Though she was still banned from the cafe, the passage of time had softened the edges of that chapter. The conversations she had with her father, once tense and full of disappointment, gradually became moments of reluctant reflection. There were no easy transformations, no sudden epiphanies, but the seeds planted by her father's firm stance and the community's rejection of her intolerance slowly began to take root. She wrestled with her own prejudices and the discomfort of being excluded from a place that had become a pillar of her family's life. Though she did not return to the cafe, the lessons of that day lingered, challenging her to rethink her assumptions and to consider the possibility of change. The rift between father and daughter remained, but it was tempered by a cautious hope that understanding could one day bridge the divide. For Layla, the cafe became a home in the truest sense, a place where she was known, valued, and celebrated for exactly who she was. The warmth she received from the owner, his wife, and the staff transformed what could have been a moment of vulnerability into a lasting source of strength. She carried that sense of belonging with her as she grew, her experiences fueling her commitment to creating safe spaces for others. The community she helped nurture through events and outreach found in her a passionate advocate and a living example of resilience and pride. The story of the confrontation was no longer a painful memory but a catalyst that had sparked something beautiful and enduring. Looking back, the owner often reflected on how a single moment of courage could change so much, not just for one young woman in a job, but for an entire neighborhood. His decision to ban Karen had been difficult, but necessary, a boundary set firmly to protect the dignity of everyone who walked through his doors. That choice had not only safeguarded the values upon which the cafe was built, but had also sparked a ripple of change that extended far beyond the business itself. It was a testament to the idea that small acts of principle, when upheld with conviction, could transform communities and inspire generations. As the sun set each evening over the neighborhood, casting long shadows that danced across the cafe's worn wooden floors, Amina's cafe stood as a symbol of hope and progress, a reminder that kindness, respect, and unwavering courage could overcome ignorance and fear. The story that began with confrontation had blossomed into a legacy of inclusion and love, proving that even the smallest spaces could become powerful sanctuaries when they are filled with the determination to protect what is just and true. And in the hearts of those who gathered there, the promise of a kinder, more understanding world was kept alive, one cup at a time.